Radhi Godrej, all the distinguished guests, the founders, the alumni, the faculty members, all the students. Let me first compliment all of you on this absolutely wonderful innings of 15 years. It's a huge achievement in many, many ways. ISB has added tremendously to India's brand equity. It's added tremendously to India's education equity. It's added in many ways. Many of you have contributed very significantly to India's growth. So all the alumni have done a phenomenal job. I was going through this wonderful book on the portraits of ISB, and then I realized what a significant contribution all of you have made in such a short time. To be ranked amongst the top 20 institutions within the first 15 years is a very, very significant achievement. And let me give you a huge, huge compliment on this, because this is a tremendous achievement. And I think all of you have made India proud in many, many ways. Adi had asked me to speak on transforming India in the 21st century and the role of higher education. I've worked for 38 years in government. I worked in a vast array of fields, from industry to commerce to fisheries to travel and tourism, every single area, but I've never worked in my life in education. But politicians and bureaucrats never know when to say no in India. And so here I am. The closest I've come to education is when, I just landed up from Kerala to Government of India. I was Secretary Tourism in Kerala, and I'd done the God's Own Country campaign. Mr. Vajpayee came there for a holiday at Kumaragam. And soon then after, I landed up in the Ministry of Tourism as Joint Secretary, and one of the things I was doing was to look after the tourism education sector, that is the Indian Hospitality Management Institute, which is really the unsung hero of that sector. We have about 24 very distinguished hospitality management institutes, including one in Mumbai, which is very, very well known, and Pusa and so on. So there was a Chief Minister's conference in Delhi at Vigyan Bhavan on reforming the education system in India. And you know how these Chief Ministers' conferences, Mr. Jagmohan was my minister, and he said, "Tum bhi chalo mere saath." So I went along with him, and I was a young joint secretary then. And you know how the Chief Ministers' conferences, they have prepared speeches, so every Chief Minister reads out, they circulate the speeches. So, they go alphabetically. So first was Mr. Chandrababu Naidu spoke. He spoke beautifully. I mean, he was a wonderful speaker, very well prepared, everything. I think this was 2003 or 4, so he must have spoken about ISB also at that point of time. And then they came to Bihar, and Lalu Yadav. He started speaking. He spoke one para. And from the other side, Mr. Mulayam Singh Yadav got up and he said, "Sir, point of order, point of order." So Mr. Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. He was sitting on top. He said, "Kya? मुलायम जी, ये पॉइंट ऑफ ऑर्डर तो पार्लियामेंट में होता है, ये चीफ मिनिस्टर कॉन्फ्रेंस में तो नहीं होता." तो ही सेड, "आप बैठ जाइए." तो देन लालू यादव read another couple of lines, and then Mulayam Singh Yadav again got up and said, "Point of order, point of order." So Mulayam Singh Yadav again very frantically said, "Sir, point of order, point of order." तो PM said, "Then बताइए क्या बात है?" So he said, "Sir, ये तो मेरी स्पीच पढ़ते जा रहे हैं, मैं क्या पढ़ूंगा जब मेरा टर्न आएगा." So this is how, the Chief Ministers of India dealt with the subject of education at that particular point of time. Anyway, so it's a great pleasure and an honor, and my belief is that, India is growing at about 7.6% per annum. It's an oasis of growth in the midst of a very barren economic landscape. But the challenge for India is really to grow at much higher rates of 9 to 10% over a 3-decade period, year after year, year after year, to be able to lift a very young population above the poverty line. 72% of our population is below the age of 32, and to my mind, this is the biggest social and economic phenomena that's taking place across the world. The population in India getting younger and younger, and the population across Europe and America getting older and older. And we'll keep getting younger, and therefore, my belief is that India must take advantage of very light dependency burdens, and this can only be done. It's impossible for India to grow at those rates till we don't focus on two or three critical areas of growth. And one is education, the other is health, and the third is nutrition, to my mind. My belief is that we need to transform these sectors very critically. And till we don't do this, it'll be very, very difficult to reap the advantages of this demographic transition. And one of the key things that we've started doing is that on primary and elementary education, we've actually created learning outcomes after a lot of interaction with the states. And we have put them out for states to achieve on an annual basis. And we will rank the states, we'll name and shame the states on the basis of this performance on a regular basis, much like what we have done on ease of doing business. On the ease of doing business, I found that actually when we started this, there was a huge challenge because we were trying to capture the delta, not historically how you've done, but what you do during the course of that year. So first year, actually, Gujarat was number 1 and Andhra was number 2 on a 100-point parameter. But next year when we did this, over 350 parameters, Gujarat was dethroned. Andhra, Telangana competed, they came number 1. But some of the new states, some of the mineral-rich states of Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh made some radical changes across several parameters, and they came 3rd and 4th. And actually, I saw chief ministers competing, I saw chief secretaries fighting, and we created a dynamic portal. So every day you could see whether you're going up or down. So the Chhattisgarh chief secretary came to me, and that day he was number 3, so he felt very happy. By the time he reached back Chhattisgarh, other states had taken several actions, they'd come down to number 7. So they went back and took several measures to come up again. So it's a competition on a daily basis, such a dynamic portal. And that's what we've now done in education and health. And I'm quite sure that if you make states compete, because India is such a large country, it's bigger than 24 countries of Europe, so if you make states compete, and much of the action is in states, you will find education improving very radically. That's really, states will take ownership and then drive it. And this is what we are doing in the field of education. But on the higher education side, there are separate challenges. And there are huge challenges. Actually, India has done extremely well. India's higher education system is the 3rd largest in the world. It's next to only the United States and China. India is the single largest provider of global talent, with 1 in 4 graduates in the world being a product of the Indian system. We have over 30 million students enrolled across 45,000 institutions, but our gross enrollment ratio lags that of other leading countries. Compared to other developed countries, India witnesses more enrollment in arts and engineering, while enrollment in medical studies is lower, and there are several reasons for that, and I'll come to some of them. The private sector in India has played a very significant role in expansion of capacity. The share of the unaided private sector has increased significantly since 2001 in terms of the number of institutions and enrollment. But what are the challenges? And I think we need to look at the key challenges which India faces. I think first and foremost, we need over 70 lakh plus additional seats to achieve 30% gross enrollment ratio by 2020. There's 70 lakh plus additional seats are needed. There's a huge variable quality of learning, and therefore reforms need to be initiated. We've had recently the first ever ranking system of colleges, which has been done by the Ministry of Education, but you need to take it out of the Ministry of Education to give it greater credibility. We need to increase our research across several streams, and the student employability is extremely low, and there's been a very slow expansion of job-oriented courses. Now, if you look at the gross enrollment ratio, and if you look at the picture of India, actually the southern states do quite well. You look at Tamil Nadu, you look at Kerala, you look at Andhra. Some of these states actually do well. They come in the top third. Then there's the middle third, which is the western part of India. But the eastern part of India is the worst performing. And actually, the whole India story is spoiled by 5 states of India. That is Bihar, which has a gross enrollment ratio of just 13%. Jharkhand, which has a gross enrollment ratio of just 13%. Chhattisgarh with 14%. West Bengal with 17%. Odisha with 18%. And therefore, there's very high regional disparity in access across states, and this needs to be set right. If you look at the quality of research, the research published, and I look at the figure across 2010 to 2015, we've had, if you were to benchmark it against global standards, and particularly in the context of what China is doing, we should have had, we've had about 6 lakhs research published papers as against 25 lakhs in China. The research citation has been 22 lakhs during this period of 2010 to 2015, whereas actually it should have been in the region of about 94 lakhs. The PhD awarded has been in India during this period of 2010 to 2015 is 24,000, out of which only 2,000 have been on technical subjects. The research quality and quantity has been definitely below global standards. So what needs to be done? To my mind, one, we need to expand our accreditation capacity and allow international reputed agencies to accredit our institutions and put this in public domain, so that we are able to say that these are institutions of good learning, and people must know which is a good institution and which is a lousy institution. And this should be a very well-established international accreditation system. It can't be the government of India and the Ministry of HRD doing this. It should be taken out, and professional agencies must do this. Secondly, we must select about 15 to 20 institutions as academic innovation centers with absolutely 100% academic autonomy and fast-track reforms which are needed. And we should give them the freedom and the flexibility and support them with resources to create world-class institutions with autonomy. Thirdly, I think we need to create a fund to provide annual project-based grants for research, to potential for excellence institutes, to push for resource, to really push for research, because I think the hallmark of a great higher institution of learning is good quality research, and target almost about 30% operating expense through internal fund generation. So allow our IITs, IIMs, NITs to raise resources through endowments, alumni-sponsored research, consultancy fee, whatever you have, but give them the freedom and the flexibility. I also feel that there's a need to expand job-oriented courses as electives for bachelor's degree. We are doing too much of academic courses across our colleges, and we need to push for job-oriented courses across this. And we also need to expedite individual faculty scores on teaching and research outputs. So this was my view, and on some of these areas, my belief is that while we have actually since our independence, since if you look at our record from 1950, we should know the landscape of our higher education. You know that we have 45 central universities. We have 129 deemed to be universities. We have 51 institutions of national importance established under Acts of Parliament. We have 318 state universities. We have 185 private universities. And actually, the number of universities has increased 34 times since 1950 over the years. And we have, the number of colleges we have is in the region of around 41,000 colleges in India. So we have just 2 Indian universities in QS Top 200 World University Rankings. And on research, we rank 45th amongst 51 countries on research outputs. Now, my belief is that what do we do to create great reputed public institutions to emerge as globally renowned teaching and research institutions? And I am a great believer in government laying down policies, but private sector really going all out to achieve this and giving the freedom and flexibility to private sector to achieve several things. And wherever we've given this freedom and flexibility, the Indian private sector, as in the case of ISB, has done an outstanding job simply because the state government there provided the land, provided the ecosystem, and ISB did a wonderful job. And look at what has happened to Hyderabad. I mean, if you go, I've been to ISB, I think a year after it had been created, and I went to ISB, I think a year and a half back, and the whole of Hyderabad has developed, expanded, evolved simply because ISB came in. So the multiplier impact of ISB in Hyderabad has been enormous. And therefore, my belief is that you put in an enabling regulatory architecture and encourage a self-selected group of very passionate and committed corporates and individuals to establish world-class research and training institutions in the private sector. And you need to give them the freedom to achieve this. Because actually, Indians have contributed very significantly to education. I mean, if you look at it, starting with the Tandons who've contributed to New York University, 100 million, Nilekanis who've contributed to Yale, Narayan Murthy who've contributed to Harvard, Tatas who've contributed 50 million to Harvard and 25 million to Cornell, and Mahindra's 10 million to Harvard. I mean, they donate to all wealthy US universities. I would suggest that many of them should actually focus on encouraging Indian universities, but and we should actually enable them to create many more ISBs in India by just allowing that ecosystem where they can take off. And therefore, why this is happening is because we are not able to give access to world-class higher education for those unable to afford going out and encourage those doing so to stay back. And we need to do this to scale. We need to do this to universities which are able to take large number of students. And we need to develop world-class institutions doing cutting-edge research, which have access to global research and teaching networks and best practices. So we actually, as Indians, we must realize that one of our highest outgo of foreign exchange is because our students go out. We finance foreign universities. We spend close to about 6 to 7 billion every year. The higher education budget of Government of India is just 2.5 billion. Actually, Indians go and spend close to 6.5 to 7 billion outside every year. That's almost 2.5 times of what the Government of India spends on education. And there's been a huge spurt of foreign students in India. Actually, it's increased in the last few years. It's increased almost fourfold. So there's a huge opportunity for higher education to grow and expand. And actually, if you are able to create world-class universities, it's possible for India to also attract a vast number of the diaspora Indians to study here, to teach in India. And I'm pretty sure that Harvard and Wharton and Yale and MIT are not going to come to India. It'll be very difficult. But it's important for India to create its own Wharton and create its own Harvard as ISB is doing. And once ISB comes in the top 10, then it will inspire many other people to do this, as it is happening in Delhi with Ashoka University. Ashoka is nothing else but actually a creation of the similar kind of ecosystem what ISB has done in the liberal arts in close to Delhi. And therefore, many of you would say that we have private universities, then what's the problem? And to my mind, the problem is really the regulatory system that we've built up through UGC and AICTE, which to my mind really needs to be, both of them need to be scrapped and thrown into the dustbin, simply because, the joint degree of Indian University with, if you look at a joint degree of Indian University with Harvard, which is, it'll be recognized in the United States, but it'll not be recognized in India. That's the UGC norm. You do a course with Harvard, you do a course with Wharton, the UGC will not recognize that. It'll be recognized in America, it'll be recognized in Europe, but it'll not be recognized in India. So, you have a unique situation where Carnegie Mellon University offers a joint degree with Shiv Nada University, which is recognized by US universities, but it is not recognized by the AICTE. So we've built up extreme rigidity with the curriculum requirements by AICTE. The curriculum structure is very prescriptive in terms of even what subjects to teach in a course. It has maximum number stipulation on the number of students in any course. It has restrictions on opening of campus centers. It lays down the time, the courses, the number of faculty for undergraduate courses. These are norms which were built for the 50s and not for 2016, 17 at all. And this is what we've done, exactly the same thing what we've done to medical education in terms of input. You're asking the same amount of land to be taken in Mumbai as you would require in a rural area of India. Mumbai, you can't get that land, so you need to build up, but you want the same amount of land. Medical Council lays the same amount of land. Same thing the UGC has done with education. And therefore, there are huge, huge restrictions. The regulatory mechanism has gone absolutely haywire, which needs to be scrapped. There are restrictions on distance courses. UGC bans public and private colleges from offering distance education outside state where physical campus is educated. It says you can do distance courses only in that state. The distance education does not recognize any geographical boundaries. So it says, no, you can only do it in Kerala. So I find it very apt. When I was in Kerala, I tried this very hard to tell UGC that actually distance education is geographically, has no boundaries, but it was very difficult to convince them. So one-size-fits-all rules and for research and teaching universities and affiliated colleges just won't work. And I think UGC and AICTE needs, both the acts need a serious relook, and I think they need radical restructuring, huge amount of liberalization. Now, what are the alternatives really to this in terms of higher education? Alternatives is that you can set up a university by an act of parliament. You can do it by a state act, as it's happening in Andhra. Andhra is a very dynamic act, and therefore it put up a state act. Or you can do it by a deemed to be university under Section 3 of UGC Act. And my belief is that actually under the UGC Act, you can create universities, world-class universities, by making UGC say that you will create world-class eminent universities where UGC will have no role, but that whole parameter will be managed and run by some people of eminence. They will manage and run these universities. They will select, you will create a differentiated category of institutions through regulations within the deemed category, and therefore you give full administrative, academic, and financial autonomy to offer courses, recruit faculty, fix fees, admit students, and form partnership without any intervention. And within the UGC Act, you carve out a separate category which is managed and run separately by a people of very eminent people, very distinguished people. So you can have some very, very distinguished leading industrialists. You can have some very leading you put together very distinguished people like Adi Godrej, Rahul Bajaj, Narayan Murthy. You can put some very eminent people and say that these are people who will take decisions in the interest of the country, and therefore we'll go by what they decide. They lay down parameters and give them the full freedom, administrative, academy, and financial autonomy. So they select the university, they select people. And there's no intervention by UGC, AICT. So this will be like an empowered expert committee of very eminent person to select these institutions. And they will also be responsible for monitoring and ensuring quality. And this in many ways will be like the RBI committee that approved licenses to payment and small banks. So you have RBI for 45 years we gave only 12 bank licenses. But in 1 year we gave 21 bank licenses, payment and small bank licenses. This was done in a very transparent process. Raghu was then the chairman, governor of RBI. He did it through a very, very distinguished set of eminent people who did this. So you can have very distinguished people who are at arm's length from UGC, and they decide that they will build up this very reputed and credible individuals who will create this. And they will evaluate the applications. They will process the whole thing and have lay down the regulatory micromanage. They will do the process of selection, and the selection process can be done through a strategic plan. You invite private sector to give you a 15-year strategic plan and an implementation plan of 5 years, and just take it out of UGC. And this eminent category of people can then external committee can do this selection through a very transparent process. And actually, we Niti Aayog have laid down this, what can be the parameters in terms of, the selection process in terms of interdisciplinary study, good share of foreign qualified faculty, good mix of domestic and foreign students, transparent merit-based admission, lab facilities doing cutting-edge scientific R&D, teaching and research, collaborations with reputed global universities, so a vast range of things. And then applicants can lay down the academic plan showing the courses they propose, the faculty recruitment, and so on. And therefore, my belief is that India should take this big leap forward of trying to build about 20 world-class institutions through a regulatory framework which is within the UGC framework, but is divorced from UGC, led by eminent people, and allow the private sector to develop and create the best possible universities. And that's exactly what Mr. Munjal is doing, what Ashoka is doing, what many people are doing, and it's you can then have a complete creation of a new ecosystem for education in terms of higher education. And therefore, this can be you'll get eminent people who are committed to the cause of establishing world-class universities through an appraisal by very eminent people based on due diligence of their implementation and strategic plans, as well as the demonstrated commitment of promoters. And they will actually give them the complete academic, administrative, and financial autonomy. And then you can have constant monitoring of these selected institutions by the same eminent people so that they are able to adhere to the plans. And my belief is that if you open out in the higher education field, it is possible for India in the next 1 decade to create 20 top-class universities, 20 top-class universities. If you can create ISB in 15 years, it's taken you 15 years to be in the top 20. It is possible for India, because if you give the freedom and flexibility within this framework of giving complete academic, financial freedom to create top-class institutions, you will see India making a paradigm shift in the higher education field. And my view is that when you combine this with outcome monitoring in primary and elementary education systems and vocationalizing the primary and elementary education system, you will see a quantum leap forward in our education system. And as I said, my belief is that it's not possible for India to achieve very high rate of growth on a consistent basis over a long period of time without education, health, and nutrition. Health and nutrition are also critical, but that's an area we'll talk about on another day. And those are very, very critical areas for India's growth. You can't have a situation where 33% of the stunted children come from India. And therefore, nutrition is a very, very critical area for India. And health outcomes is another area where we worked on. We are again working with states on that. We're doing a series of workshops. We are again making states compete on that, on outcomes. We've for long worked on inputs. We've for long worked on outputs. We need to change input outputs into outcome monitoring very closely and make a huge, huge, radical, revolutionary shift. And the only way to do this today in higher education is to radically alter and scrap the existing statutes of UGC and AICTE. They are totally redundant, they're totally outdated, and they're moribund. And without that, India will not be able to go forward. So with these few words, ladies and gentlemen, my belief is that government should act as a facilitator, it should act as a catalyst, it should act as an agency to create the right ecosystem for private sector, to create the right institutions for India to make a quantum jump forward in higher education. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.